It's 5 after 4, and the Planning Commission will come to order. Are there changes to the agenda?
There should be no changes. Everything should be heard. I think we have a representative from St. John's here. Okay. Yeah, we did make arrangements for that. So.
All right. Then the first item on the agenda is approval of the regular minutes of the May 6th meeting. May I have a motion?
Make a motion we approve the minutes of the May 6th meeting.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Same sign. Motion carries 6-0. Second item on the agenda is application CU08-2 filed by Lonnie Wilson, requesting approval of a conditional use permit to allow a self-service car wash to be converted to mini warehouses in a C5 service commercial district. The subject property is legally described as lots 26, 7, 8, 29, 30, and that portion of a vacated alley and vacated Grand Avenue adjacent thereto to Block 9 of the Pacific Addition to the City of Salina, Saline County, Kansas, also known as 701 North 12th Street. This is continued from the May 6th meeting. You have a staff report.
Before we enter into the staff report, I just wanted to refer you to 3 items that you should have at your places up there. One of them is a supplemental information. It's about PDD application, which is item 3, and that has some recommended conditions there that we'll go through on the screen. And then what was not included in your packet was what our standards and criteria are for reviewing and approving plan developments. And then there's a third item there that deals with item 4 on your agenda, and that is some side issues that relate to the platting of that property off of Schilling Road. So you should have 3 different supplement handouts there. And going to item 2, this is an item that was continued from your last meeting, and the request is to take a building that was formerly serving as a self-service car wash with multiple bays, and the applicant would like to convert that to a warehouse facility or a mini warehouse facility with multiple bays. We have a property that occupies 5 lots, and it's about a half block from Broadway Boulevard. So you can see on the aerial photo there, it's bordered by North 12th and by on the east and Grand on the south. It doesn't actually have frontage on Broadway. It has a mixture of service commercial related businesses in the vicinity as well as residential to the south. This site was once occupied by a single family dwelling. That house was removed, and a metal building constructing a car wash was constructed in 1964, and then in the 70s that was enlarged by 2 bays. So the overall length of the building is 115 feet, and the car wash that operated here closed in 1997. The building has essentially been vacant since that time. The new property owners come forward with plans for converting that to a mini warehouse facility with 6 individual storage bays. The owner has obtained permits to install garage doors and partitions necessary to create 6 individual spaces. We think in looking at the site that the building that's there and the site would be suitable for that transition to mini warehouse use. This will allow the existing building to be maintained and put back into productive use. It can be accessed from both sides, and there's ample paving area there for maneuvering and backing and loading and unloading. This is not your traditional mini warehouse or mini storage development. It's really a adaptive reuse of a car wash building, but mini warehouses or mini storage facilities are a conditional use in C5. So we did provide notice to the neighboring property owners, and it does require a hearing and allows anybody interested to give input on the proposal. I think you're very familiar with C5 zoning. Most of Broadway from Pacific to North Street is Zone C5. You've got uses like automobile sales, automobile repair, lumber yards, things of those nature. are allowed in C5. The present building has a 50-foot setback on the west and a 5-foot setback on the north. It covers about 18% of the lot, so again, there's ample room for maneuvering. We're not looking at any on-site office. I think the applicant can clarify this, but our understanding is the target market is contractors or small businesses and not your residential homeowner with too much stuff. So we'll let them clarify that. But as far as the welfare and convenience of the public, the applicant states they have cleaned up the site, installed overhead garage doors to secure the building and get away from the disused appearance of the building. We would agree that this would put a vacant building back into productive use. As far as impact on the neighborhood, a mini warehouse would have less traffic, less noise impact than continued operation as a car wash. There's only minor cosmetic changes being proposed to the building, so we don't see any overall negative impact from this change of use. There are a couple of signs related to the previous business that have been abandoned, and that will need to be addressed by the current owner. There shouldn't be any additional impact on public utilities other than it will be a much lower water user than a car wash. Most storage bays do not have a need for utilities or any heating and cooling. Because there's no off-site office and there's plenty of paved apron, there wouldn't be any need to designate specific parking areas. There's ample room for maneuvering. This is in an area that's shown as commercial mixed use on the city's comprehensive plan, and it is in close proximity to Broadway Boulevard. Your options would be to approve this conditional use permit. You could approve it subject to specified conditions or revisions to the plan. You could table the application if you think you need additional information to reach a decision, or you could deny the application if the required findings can't be made or if you think this would be incompatible with the neighborhood. Our recommendation would be to approve the request subject to the two conditions, and one of those deals with removal of the pole sign that continues to refer to the car wash business. I think with that I'd be happy to address any questions that you have.
Is there only one sign on that property, and that's the one we're looking at?
There's a smaller ground sign that exists. It would be, well, you can see that over there, and then we have this sign here. The smaller sign could probably be converted over or painted over, but the Dr. Pepper sign really doesn't have any bearing with what's going on there and should be removed.
So removing the sign consists of what?
Removing the frame and the pole supports.
Can they
So-
just cut it off? Or do
Well,
they have to?
you can cut it off or you can pull it out of the ground, but it's not serving the current business. And we allow a certain period of time to see if another use is going back in, but that time period has expired. I think if we had a specific plan for how that would be used related to the mini warehouse business, I think we could consider that, but that's not been expressed, so our feeling is it should be removed, and the other sign could be painted over and reused.
Dean, I had a question regarding the floor drains that are in each one of the bays, and then also on the outside bay on the, I don't even know what direction it is, on the one end, the south end, I guess it is. There's a ground drain there. Do those pose any hazard, or is there any issues with those?
Well, I had some discussions with the building official before we came down, and the discussion focused on what if somebody wants to rent one of these and store a vehicle in it. And that is fine, but you couldn't use these bays, you know, to do service work or to be changing fluids out or doing anything with a vehicle. So I think the only concern would be if that type of work was taking place, but that is going to be prohibited as part of any storage use. So you could have storage there, but we did an inspection here and the building official looked at it, he wasn't concerned about the floor drains remaining, but you can't have any service related activity going on in the bays. It's storage only.
They are hooked to the current sanitary sewer system.
That is our understanding, yes.
Seems to me they ought to be disconnected.
Well, that might be counterproductive if they were disconnected, because if any fluids or anything did get in there, then it would fill up and have no place to
Well,
drain.
but you don't want it in the sanitary sewer system either, do you?
No, we don't want anything of that nature, but there shouldn't be anything in there. In an ideal world, the floor drains would be capped and filled in. But the building official didn't feel like that was a requirement that the code absolutely required. But if the doors are shut and the storage there, we're not going to be getting rainwater or things like that down into the sanitary sewer. I don't believe the outside drain drains to the sanitary sewer. I believe it drains to the storm.
Any other questions of staff? Comments by the applicant? None? Comments by interested parties?
I have a question for the applicant.
Could you come forward and state your name and address, please?
My name's Joan Wilson, and I live at 541 Claremont Drive in Salina.
The garage doors have not yet been placed, is that correct?
No, they're
Are
being
they
installed.
Garage
They're
doors have
installed.
been installed.
I drove by there, and it was a little bit difficult for me to tell that. The building is fairly unattractive. And a little run-down looking. Is there anything that you're proposing to do other than those garage doors for the aesthetics of the area?
Well, I know that there's been a lot of repair made to it. The siding that was broken and torn has been repaired.
Okay.
The color doesn't match because of the new siding and the old siding, but all the holes and things, as far as I know, have been repaired.
So there won't be any painting done, or anything that would...
I don't know of any plans to do that. I don't know that he'd be opposed to doing it, but I don't know of any plans to do that.
Any other questions of the applicant? Thank you. Any comments by interested citizens? Okay. There being none, we'll bring it back to the commission for possible action.
Well, I believe that certainly the north end of Salina is an area that we need to think about in terms of aesthetics, and certainly our focus groups have kind of aligned with that thinking. I would make a motion that we approve application CU008-2 as a mini storage unit, and give the applicant my personal thoughts that I would hope that in the process of doing this that they would sincerely think about some aesthetic improvements to that area, as it is very close to an area that's getting a lot of improvement right now on that end of town anyway.
And you want to add the two staff recommendations?
With the two staff recommendations about signage, yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve application CU08-2 with the two conditions. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. The motion's carried. Next item on the agenda, application PDD 08-2, filed by Steve Panko on behalf of Salina Partners LLC, requesting a change in zoning district classification from C3 Shopping Center District to Planned Development District with underlying zoning of C3 Shopping Center District with some modifications. The subject property is legally described as Lot 1, Block 1 of the Lambert's addition to the City of Salina, Saline County, Kansas, which is in the process of being replatted into multiple lots and blocks. Is there a staff report, please?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is a request to go from a C3 zoning classification to create a planned development district with the primary underlying zoning being C3. The Planning Commission has seen a redevelopment district plan related to TIF financing for this property. You have also seen a proposed replat that would reconfigure this property and bisect it with a extension of Planet Avenue that would come out and connect with Knight Street. This is an application filed by Salina Partners, and that consists of Steve Panko and Christian Oblaw as the primary development group. And we've talked about this property in this general vicinity, but going back to 1969, this piece of property was part of the original Mid-State site, which was actually constructed outside the city limits and then later annexed. But this piece of property had always remained undeveloped, and it was finally platted and zoned in 1984, but it has never been developed. There's been no proposal for development activity since that time up until now. And as you know, the Lambert's addition was originally platted as just one large lot and block, and you reviewed a replat that would change that. The application that's filed here is filed in order to comply with the terms of a development agreement related to a TIF redevelopment district that was created for this property, and that development agreement was approved by the City Commission on March 17th. And there was a specific section in that development agreement, and in the paragraph C there it says, developer shall submit a rezoning application for a planned development district which shall encompass the entire redevelopment district. And the primary purpose or reason for that is that the development agreement has a big set of covenants that go with it, but it is tied to the financing and the selling of bonds to finance improvements in this area, and the covenants expire once those bonds are paid off. And the city manager thought it would be useful to all involved to have those covenants essentially outlive the bonds and run with the land. And so one way to do that is through a planned development district. The other side of the coin on a planned development district allows the Planning Commission to create a customized zoning district for proposed development, which you can limit and add uses. You can modify lot sizes, setbacks, parking, landscaping requirements, as well as lot coverage and density limitations if it's residential. In this particular case, you've seen the plat, and there was an adjustment made, discussions about whether the property west of Planet Avenue would be platted as one lot and block with a lease line, or whether it would be done with a platted lot and block and a lot line. And so we are back to considering that a lease line. So that means that Lot 1, Block 1, the future site of a Kohl's store, would cover about 8 acres. The outlot that's along 9th Street would cover about 1.96 acres. You've got a Kohl's department store and a future retail addition. Those would cover about 78,000 square feet, which covers about 22% of the site. The buildings would be oriented to face Planet and 9th Street. The building height would be 24 feet compared to a C3 maximum of 35. The building setbacks as proposed are adequate. There's adequate paved access for fire apparatus and delivery trucks to get around the building. The parking ratios for department stores, the minimum requirements for a retail space would be 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet, and that is met on both those sites, whether they're considered individually or jointly. There is a possibility that the outlot may develop. We may have future restaurants or uses of that nature there, and that would be addressed through a review of the site plan for that outlot at that time. The signage proposed includes one pylon sign located along 9th Street and I believe this is the location here for a pylon sign, and then there's a second location back in this location. So it is not unusual for our developments that front on 9th Street and I-135 to have signage oriented both directions. We don't know anything about signage for the outlots, except it's our recommendation that the individual business or outlot signs be limited to monument or ground signs. The concept is that there would be space available on the multi-tenant pylon sign to indicate the businesses here, and the businesses here would have individual ground signs, and then this would also be a multi-tenant sign there. We do have a landscape buffer proposed between the rear of the buildings and pond adjacent to I-135. I think John has a colorized version there, so we will have a buffer. It will actually be between the pond and the rear area. We'll have islands within the parking lots, and then front yard landscaping as indicated there. There's also a plan to do some landscaping in a center median island there. Parking lot has buffers at the end of the rows and is broken up by islands. Those will feature probably, we're probably looking at individual trees in some of the islands and either a mulch or landscape rock, and then they could also serve as locations for light poles. I think we'll let Mr. Moeller, the civil engineer, expand on that. I think street access is pretty clear. The primary design feature for how this is laid out is the extension of Planet Avenue coming up. This is Office Max, Subway. Planet Avenue would extend here, and there's already turning lanes and an intersection here. This would be the primary access from 9th Street. In our review of this, we believe that the development plan that's been developed is certainly compatible in design, layout, scale, and character with other retail development in the 9th Street corridor, and with the development agreement that's already been approved as part of the TIF redevelopment district component of this project. So we would recommend approval of creation of the planned development district. What the handout there that refers to standards and criteria for planned developments, these are the things that we walk through when we write a staff report and that the commission should consider when they're looking at a plan. But the plan indicates that it will be completed within the period of time specified in the schedule of development. I think the outlot is a little less certain. We don't see how this would injure or damage or hurt the values or use of adjoining property. It will be accessible by public roads that are adequate to carry the loads imposed. If it is determined that traffic signals are needed at Key Avenue, they will be installed and provided. We don't see any undue burden on public services like police or fire protection. And the other items deal with covenants and things of those natures. And that's part of what the Plan Development District was designed to do, was to take those covenants and put them into a ordinance form as a Plan Development District, with the city being in a role of being able to enforce those. The areas that aren't used for parking or structures have been set aside for landscaping. The pond is not landscaped, but would essentially function as a green space area. And the final item there is that the Planning Commission is authorized to approve modifications of zoning or other regulations that would otherwise be applicable to the site through the Plan Development District review process. I think, John, I would like to go to the supplemental report with the recommendations and kind of walk through those. The recommendation would be that we would maintain the uses allowed in the C3 district. There have been no conditional uses requested, so there wouldn't be any added at this time. The Coles had some certain stipulations in the development agreement about land uses and retailers that they did not want to see within the Planned Development District or the redevelopment district as noted in the agreement. Those are carried over here. Some of these would have to be approved anyway to be in a planned development district. They wouldn't normally be seen in a C3 district, but this articulates those specifically. So we have 7 would be more like a laundry plant or something on a commercial scale, a uniform cleaning or processing place. There would be no service stations or auto repairs, no movie theaters or live performance theaters, no residential units, no veterinary hospitals, no funeral homes, no adult-oriented uses, and no 15 would refer to items that would be a pure bar or tavern that had no food sales. But obviously if there was a operation like Chili's or places like that that had served alcoholic beverages, but it was part of a food service operation, those would not be excluded. I think then, John, we get to flea markets, no churches or schools, no massage parlors, no casinos, which would not be allowed presently under our local or state laws, and then some limitations on fast food restaurants with drive-in. The item 2 there deals with allowing them a ratio between 4 and 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet of floor area. To do otherwise would require an exception to be approved by the City Commission. I think item 3 there is the one that we would want the most feedback or input on. It's been customary in planned commercial and planned development districts to spell out pretty specifically the sign allocations and locations, so there's no confusion about where and what type of signage is permitted. And so their proposal is to have freestanding multi-tenant pylon signs that I showed you on the plan. Based on our review of other locations in the corridor and similar multi-tenant sites, we were recommending an overall size limit on the pylon sign of 260 square feet, which should accommodate multiple tenants. But if it doesn't, or it doesn't meet the Coles prototype in a multiple tenant center, then we would want some feedback on that. We're proposing that on the outlot that be limited to monument or ground signs only, and that individual sign not exceed 48 square feet, and in our ordinance, 8 square feet is the highest you can be with a ground sign. Then for businesses, including Kohl's or others that had wall signs, those would just be allowed based on what our current sign ordinance says, based on the frontage of the site. And the pole signs on the outlots would not be permitted, nor would any type of sign that advertised a business that wasn't located within the planned development district. So I think that particular item we'd probably want to have some discussion on. Just by way of comparison, the sign that Walmart has is 136 square feet. Sam's Club sign is 135 square feet. Target sign is 144 square feet. Surprisingly, the restaurants with slightly smaller sites have larger signs than the retail stores. Red Lobster sign is 178 square feet. Burger King sign is 152 square feet. The other item, I guess, for comparison purposes, the pylon signs that Midstate installed at their entrances, the one on 9th Street, is 300 square feet in area, but it accommodates space for 14 tenants to be listed. And we don't anticipate that there would be 14 tenants in this area, but I think if our 260 square foot would be too limiting, or if the 30-foot height limit, which is what the C3 district has, would be too limited based on previous understandings, we would want to have that input. I think, John, and if we could keep scrolling on that, many of these other things were identified in the development agreement, but as far as exterior building materials, there would be no precast concrete panels, no metal siding, no vinyl siding allowed on any of the buildings. No trash dumpsters or loading docks could be on the 9th Street side of any of the buildings. Landscaping would be from the recommended tree list and xeriscape plant list. Sidewalks would be provided on Planet Avenue and Key Avenue. And then I think the specific items that would be waivers or modifications from standard C3 or other development limitations would be if you add up the amount of private property along Planet Key South 9th Street, that is less than would be required based on the width and depth of the site, and that's primarily because the size of the detention pond in the rear pushes everything forward. And also it would cover more than 60% of the front 25 feet of the property along those locations also. So this would allow or also require that the median in Key Avenue be landscaped, but also be maintained by the developer. And then D there, because the pylon signs will not be located on the outlots, they are actually off-premise for those businesses, and so item D there would specifically allow that. Item 12 requires that the development occur consistent with the plans that are presented to you today, and item 13 there would require that when there is a plan ready to develop the outlots along 9th Street, that those plans would come back, the final plan would come back and be reviewed by this body prior to getting building permits on that site, and that would be consistent with the other planned districts along South 9th Street. So I think with that, I would stand for any questions about the staff report or the supplemental recommendations, and then we'd also want to hear some feedback from the applicant on recommended conditions.
I had one question. There's parking on the northeast corner up there that's separated from the businesses by the entrance and also separated from Kohl's. I take it by a road that goes past there. Whom does that parking serve? You see what I'm...
Well, I mean, this really indicates, and I'll let Mr. Moeller speak to that, but I interpret it that the cross-hatching is indicating areas where the paving is going to be reinforced to support trucks or heavier traffic, but you will have access aisles here, here, and here to get into the parking lot. This will also be an access island or aisle, but it's primarily going to be used by delivery trucks and truck traffic. Most of the customers entering will probably use these 3 aisles here. Anybody parking here would have to cross over that and then get up to the store by that way. I guess we'll ask Mr. Moeller maybe can expand on whether this is a sidewalk or what is planned there, but my guess would be that the primary users of that parking lot would be employees who worked at the store. Because I don't think it will be heavily used by customers except in a heavy shopping environment.
That's part of the required parking for
Yes,
Kohl's.
it is part of the Kohl's site comes out into that configuration, but this parking is tied back to the Kohl's store.
I have a question regarding the outlot. Is it conceivable that that could be divided into multiple units, say Barnes and Nobles and a Starbucks?
From an ownership standpoint, it could be divided into ownership by just splitting at one time and have 2 separate owners, or if you had somebody who wanted to develop that and build a multi-tenant building and then lease spaces out, that could certainly be done. But it's almost 2 acres in size, so it certainly can accommodate multiple uses or tenants.
Bearing that in mind, then number 3 on your supplemental staff report, if I'm reading this right, on the outlot, signs shall be limited to 1 monument ground sign with maximum permitted sign area of 48 square feet. So if there was 2 buildings there, they would be sharing that 48 square feet? Is that what you're saying? Or could each one?
I think we would look at that probably either from a lease line or a lot line standpoint. But I think part of that's going to be decided by you anyway, because it will come back. But if there were 4 businesses there, I would anticipate you could have 4 ground signs,
Okay.
depending on how that was laid out.
I just didn't want to limit future development by keeping it to only 1 ground sign there.
Would it make you feel better if it said, shall be limited to 1 monument ground sign per business?
That would make me feel much better, and I'm
Okay.
sure the
Then
applicant
Would it
feel better.
remain the same square footage then?
it would still be 48 square feet per tenant or business. And that would be our recommendation. Most ground signs that are being put in are generally 4 by 8 or close to, some cases 40 square feet. It's 48 square feet would be considered large for a ground sign. The other thing is that it's anticipated that the tenants would also be identified on the pylon, the larger, taller pylon sign. But I think that would be reasonable, since we anticipate multiple businesses there, to make that 1 ground sign per business.
In the standards and criteria for plan development, the 3rd bullet there regarding traffic control signals,
Yes.
does that need extend for forever? Is the developer always responsible for the expense of a traffic control signal if it's 10 years or 20 years or?
Well, the development agreement has some very specific things on that, but it requires that a traffic study be done, and that it requires that if a warrant is met, that traffic signals be installed, and that the cost of that be borne by the development.
Oh, so at the time of development, not down the road, if in 5 years we find that with the new businesses out front, that it's really creating...
Well, if you're doing it right, then your traffic study is based on the anticipated maximum build-out. And so I'll let Mr. Place speak to that a little bit about way he would interpret a traffic study. But if you have, we know what one use is, we don't know what the other uses is, but I'll let Mr. Place speak to that. But generally, you're projecting what the maximum traffic would be, not just looking at the first development.
Mr. Andrews is exactly correct. That's what we've asked them to do on their traffic study, is to take all the vacant lots that are in that corridor, assume maximum or just conservative traffic flows that would be anticipated once these are developed, and what conditions that puts the whole corridor in. That's what we asked them to do.
Is that somewhat limited by the number of parking spaces as well?
I don't understand your question.
Would the traffic in and out of there be limited by the parking spaces, the turnover of parking spaces?
Well, that would be somewhat, I mean, I've not reviewed specifically what it is, but like I said, we've just asked them to, what would be in each location, what would be the maximum, what they would feel would be the maximum amount of vehicles that could be produced by each currently undeveloped piece of ground right now. So that would have some effect to it, yes.
So if in 2 years, after buildings are up and it's determined that actually a traffic signal needs to go there, then the developer no longer has the responsibility for that? If the traffic study didn't show it was warranted at this point?
Correct.
This is what
Those interior streets and drives are all private streets and drives and will be maintained by the developer.
Planet Avenue will be a public street, built to public street standards and maintained by the city, as will Key. Planet will and Key.
Oh, okay.
This section is a public street, and here.
Okay, there's also a note up there between Ashley Furniture and the bank, says cross-access to be determined. Is that going to happen? Maybe we need to ask the developer.
We'll let Mr. Moeller speak. That the idea was that if it was determined that signals were not warranted, which I understand it has not been, I think what the best thing we would do is to let Mike Scragg, Deputy City Manager, speak to the options available without signalization.
Thank you, Dean. This has been part of the development agreement negotiation, which is part of why I'm involved, and all of this is kind of playing out here as we speak, or at least very recently. The traffic study has been done. It's been forwarded to Wilson and Company. I just saw comments today. I believe the city manager shared those comments with the developer, but the conclusion of the traffic study that was conducted, as well as Wilson and Company's review on our behalf, was that a traffic signal wasn't warranted as part of this project. And in answer to your question, that's not to say that future ultimate development of the 9th Street corridor might not require that at some point, but even that's questionable, but it would be something the city would have to address somewhere down the line, not necessarily as part of this development. Negotiating the development agreement, we didn't have that traffic study, and so we were trying to take into account a number of scenarios, and so that in part is why the site plan includes the reference of cross-access to be determined at a future date. Now that we have the traffic study and it's concluded that a signal is not warranted, the development agreement provides that access across Midstate would be included into the project. The developer's been in initial contact with them and actually has a set of easements that Midstate's already agreed to, if you just kind of envision a true square intersection going straight up between Cap Fed and Ashley's, and then intersecting that access road that runs east and west. That's the alignment of the easements. We indicated as part of the development agreement, we wanted to have further discussion with the developer about the actual layout and see if there isn't a better way to configure that, as well as control. If you're familiar with the Midstate property, as you come in off of 9th Street, that's just a wide open parking lot, and you can hang a left as you choose and weave through that parking lot. So we need to clean up those easements to make sure that we can get some traffic control in there. We're also trying to come up with a configuration that may create a better intersection at the bollards there in the middle of that parking lot. Not sure exactly how those layouts might work, but the development agreement language basically provides that there'll be ongoing discussion about that configuration subject to city review and approval. So we're trying to take into account that all that's going to have to play out in kind of a progression. At the moment, we've reached the conclusion traffic signal's not warranted. We're now to the point of having to work through those cross-access easements on Midstate. Additionally, then, the development agreement contemplates the timing of all that in relation to this project going forward and their completion target of March, and making sure that all that's resolved by then, and that we have basically some alternatives. So we've now narrowed down the scenario that we're under thanks to the traffic study, and it'll be necessary to finalize the configuration of the cross-access across Midstate. While I'm up here, if I can take the opportunity, I understand there was some question about the signage, and they did share with us their sign configuration. I think, if I understand correctly, there is the need for one sign at a height of 50 feet, or at least a request for that. So I believe Jason Moeller was intending to come up and clarify that as well. But I've been a little bit more involved with this communication as a TIF project and the Coles project than typical, and I've been in receipt of that signage information, and I'm not sure where we're at in terms of getting that passed on to Dean, but they have communicated the desire for a 50-foot sign in one instance.
I would just, I'd say that depending on how difficult it's perceived to get into this property, people, I can understand, may use the light there going into the Midstate Mall and then come across.
Right.
So I think it's very important to
And then there's also the Belmont connection to the south with another light. And I would tell you from staff's perspective, we certainly scrutinize the methodology of the traffic study, because I think, came into it with the expectation that a traffic light would be warranted, and recognizing that there's also concern about a traffic light may have negative impacts on the flow of the 9th Street corridor.
And I understand all that. It's just what people perceive as,
Sure.
Do I want to wait to turn across traffic here, or just go down to the light and then cut through? I think it's just going to...
From city staff's perspective, we certainly were mindful of wanting to do the traffic study, make a determination of whether this project warranted the need for a traffic light, so that we weren't in a situation where we realized after the fact we should have gotten one. And we're comfortable both from the traffic study that was provided by the developer, as well as our review on our behalf by Wilson & Company, that it's not warranted. And for what it's worth, there's kind of a predetermined manual for uniform traffic control devices that was the standard by which they made that determination. It's not just a arbitrary individual opinion.
Are those so-called traffic ways across Midstate Mall public right-of-ways?
Those would be provided for by cross-access easements, and so they would be available to the public, but they wouldn't be public in terms of city maintenance like a standard street. But our expectation would be the easements would be sufficient that it wouldn't preclude public utilization of those in the future.
Would there be a way to direct traffic? I'm not sure I've heard this. Is there a way to direct traffic through Midstate Mall parking lot so that it's safe, and maybe to the east along 9th Street and around, so that they aren't weaving in and out through the parking lot to get there?
Yes, that's, now that we've identified the traffic signal isn't warranted and we're going to go the route of cross-access on Midstate, that's exactly what we're going to be looking at in the way of design plans.
Does that need to be included in any motion we make today?
I think it could go either way. It's certainly provided for in the development agreement, and we're trying to incorporate the development agreement terms into the conditions of the PDD ordinance, but That would be at your discretion. It's currently provided for in the development agreement.
Okay.
And just, not that I need to know this necessarily, but I'm just curious. I understand that the developer develops a relationship with the Mid-State Mall people and gets that access worked out. And there's some kind of compensation to Mid-State Mall, and if they decide we need some bollards or something along here, then who's responsible for all of that?
The developer. In fact, as we negotiated the terms of the development agreement, there certainly was a presumption that there's going to be some physical improvements involved, and those will be at the Kohl's developer's expense. So I think the expectation is that there will be traffic controls such that it isn't the free-for-all that it is today.
Well, and I think it can be a plus for Mid-State Mall, too. I mean,
Right.
it's more traffic, and it's not a negative, it's just who's going to be responsible for what.
Right. In the end, it's going to take some coordination to come up with a design that's acceptable to all three parties.
And the traffic light that's now at Mid-State Mall is certainly able to withstand even more traffic, and I mean, there's nothing about that light.
Yes. If anything, it might be timing changes, but yes. In fact, part of the traffic study included considering the benefits of synchronizing the 9th Street corridor to try to offset any impacts, but my understanding is it just initially didn't meet the traffic generation requirements to even warrant a light to begin with.
We hope someday it will.
Exactly.
So there'll be a left turn lane then? Or will you stop traffic in the left in order to turn?
It'll be the current configuration. I don't know that there'll be a turn lane. There won't be any reconfiguration of the 9th Street at the key intersection.
Those are already built in. There's already island cuts there and for that.
Oh, yeah, I do remember that. It goes nowhere at this point. Yeah, okay.
You turn into an entryway.
Be happy to answer any other questions if you have them, and I'll be here if needed.
Thank you very much.
I guess I have a question for Dean. This handout that we just got in regards to the signage, besides the 50-foot issue, the Kohl's sign up above is 171 square feet, but back to your supplemental staff report on number 3, did the 260 square feet include all of the tenant?
It probably didn't take into account the other tenants. I think it was anticipated that would accommodate the Kohl's and the major tenant to the south, but I think based on what I'm seeing here, then it's going to be more like...
I get 310 square feet for all of the tenants, the major and then the 4 smaller ones, and plus the 171.
Yes, I'm coming up with closer to 500 square feet.
Total, right.
Yes.
So the 260 square feet should be just for the main, the anchor.
Well, since we're talking about multi-tenant signs and we're talking about accommodating the tenants from the outlots, then I'm looking at a number that is essentially double that, which is up to 520 square feet.
Which we would be okay with then.
I think this would fit within that concept, because this accommodates up to 4 tenants on the outlots in addition to the what you'd consider a major tenant south of the Kohl's store.
And maybe I'm getting the cart ahead of the horse here a little bit. For this issue today, for the Planned Development District, do we need to be concerned with the sign height on this right now? Is that something we need to build into our motion today, or do we need
Yes, we do, because the standard cap on the height of a sign in the C3 district is 30 feet, and they're requesting 50 feet along the interstate, which is not unusual, but that 50-foot that we do have along interstates is not in the C3 district. It's in our highway commercial districts. So we do have some signs to the south of here that are 50 and some above 60 feet in height. But because we have existing zoning of C3 and that's the underlined zoning, then we would, that line 4 there that says pylon sign shall have a maximum permitted sign area of 520 square feet instead of 260, and that with a maximum sign height of 50 feet along I-135 is what I understand was being proposed.
Great.
These mock-ups here don't show a 50-foot prototype, but essentially both signs would look like this. One would simply be taller along the interstate.
How large is the sign, did you tell us, at the other mall?
I'm going back and recalculating that now. There's a sign that says Mid-State, and it's about 100 square feet. And then there's a sign that has the tenants on that below that, and that's about 399 square feet. So the total would be close to 500.
And the other mall?
Central Mall?
Yes.
I don't have any information on that, but again, they have the one very large tenant pylon sign, but I don't have a square footage on it.
I'm just trying to visualize.
Well, if you I think the closest visualization is, and I have a picture of it here, so maybe that'll help. This is the Mid-State Plaza pylon sign, and that's about 500 square feet.
Okay.
So we're looking at slightly 20, close to or at that sign.
And what is in our code right now?
Our code right now does not limit the number of signs. It limits the total square footage.
Okay.
So one of our challenges that we had historically at Mid-State Plaza was the fact that they could have somewhere near 8,000 square feet of sign area based on their I-135 Magnolia 9th Street frontage. And because they didn't have a limit on the number of pole signs, so what this would do would be to congregate the square footage into two large signs as opposed to what you had at Mid-State. Because if you do not have a planned district or a planned development district, then if somebody wanted to have 7 pole signs, they could, as long as it fit within the square footage limitations. So this calls out the locations of the signs, so you know that there's one here and here. And then if you specified a maximum height of 50 feet for the I-135, and I think 520 square feet is the right number for a total square footage.
And what would be another interstate sign that's 50 feet at this time?
I believe one of the I don't know if it's Country Inn and Suites or another user there that would be close to that, but most of the signs that are at Schilling and I-135 are higher than 50 feet.
Baymont would be 60 or 65, I think.
Yes, I believe the
Afraid you were
Comfort Suites sign that's proposed would be in that range. The Hampton Inn sign is at 70 feet. The Courtyard by Marriott, I know the Quick Shop sign is at 55 feet. So it would be in that neighborhood. I don't think there is not any sign on 9th Street that is higher than 30 feet, but we have numerous signs on I-135 that are higher than 30 feet. Okay. So I think that's the difference.
Did you say that this is C3 and that the height of that sign should be what?
30 feet.
30 feet. So we're going outside of that, and is there a problem with other C3 tenants that are going to want 50-foot signs?
You're talking about what we're doing here is creating a customized district based on a specific plan for this
so
site.
That's not a problem.
Right. I mean, if somebody who also had a planned district wanted to come in and make that case that that should be different. What has been consistent, and I keep a chart here, and it has about 22 signs on it, but the Planning Commission has been steadfast on 9th Street of keeping everything at 30 feet, so you don't get in the situation where this one's 30, this one's 35, well, then I need to be 40 to be seen above that one. So there's a level playing field on 9th Street. I-135, it's variable, but we have signs at 35, we have signs at 50, we have signs at 70.
Do we know if any of these signs will be digital or moving or?
I think I would defer that to the applicant, but most of us have seen the standard Kohl's signage, and they are the standard internal illumination signs.
They are internally lit.
They are internal that's what these show right now. I'd let Mr. Mikesell translate for you, but that's the way we read it, is internally illuminated signs.
That is correct.
Okay.
Any other questions of staff? Would the applicant come forward,
Right.
state your name and address, and
Bulk-wise, it's 500 square feet.
open yourself for questions? If you have any statements to make, please do so.
Yeah, Jason Moeller, Crafton Toll Sparks, here on behalf of the applicant. I don't know that I have a lot to add. Dean answered the question about the portion of parking up there towards the northeast corner very accurately. It would function as part of the overall parking requirement for Kohl's and would probably serve as employee-type parking. I think our request regarding signage is accurate as well. We would ask for the 50-foot sign. Beyond that, I would just be here to answer any questions you might have.
Can you talk a little bit about what the landscaping will look like?
Yeah, certainly, and in fact, Dean mentioned the island, the buffer island in between parking stalls there. That is intended to be a landscaped area with the xeriscaping types of plant material, mulch, and whatnot. Almost all of the internal islands would be plant material and not just turf. Some of the blue areas around the perimeter would be turf and trees. But the intention there is landscaped area as well, finished, irrigated landscaping.
One thing I would clarify is while the area along Planet Key and 9th, as far as just the green area, is less than what our normal formula would, the number of plantings is the same as if the area was there. So they're not requesting less plantings or less plant material. There's just less total green areas. So what it amounts to is probably less grass area, but in terms of shrubs and trees and those, they're not reducing those from what we would require.
But the overall area is less.
The overall, basically what we're talking about is the width of this area on the private side of the property line here and here is less deep than what our regulations would require for a property that has that much frontage and depth. It's a formula based on the depth and width of a lot.
And it's less because of the parking requirement, or?
Because
Yes,
of
ma'am.
the
Very
pond
tight parking
primarily.
lot.
Pond, here, yeah.
Primarily because of the pond. We're not getting extra over and above spaces in reducing landscaping. It's primarily because the pond, the size of it, and again, Mr. Moeller can explain to you how he sized the pond, but the width and the total size of the pond caused the building to be pushed forward, which caused the parking to be pushed forward, and the introduction of a street there. And it's not because of the overabundance of parking, it's because of the pond area at the rear is much larger than would normally be required because of the off-site water.
And remind me again how many acres you said that property has been draining?
little over 60, if I remember right.
I thought that, I've been telling people that, and they just absolutely don't believe me.
The one evidence of that is if you look at the box culvert that's right in front of Subway, coming underneath 9th Street. It's a very large drainage structure. I don't remember the size. I could probably look here, but it's a big box, like
Yeah, it's
10
not a
feet
tube,
wide.
it's a box like you'd have for a stream.
I would add to one comment Dean made regarding the landscaping. We were short a little bit in terms of landscaping area along Planet Avenue. However, we had some excess landscaping relative to code along 9th Street. So the overall area of landscaping provided
I
is
see.
more
Okay.
than code requirements.
Okay.
You also have a big drainage ditch coming in from the south behind Office Max, don't you?
Actually, it's my understanding that the Office Max property in Belmont Plaza has its own detention pond. So I'm not aware of
Well,
any
they have
drainage.
detention ponds, but they still drain across the back of your property, don't they?
I believe that the detention pond for the Office Max discharges into the KDOT right away and goes right along the highway.
It is pumped into the I-135 right away, and then it meanders actually outside the boundaries of this property up along the I-135 right away.
Okay. Well, I noticed there was a huge ditch back there.
Yes.
You're going to have sidewalks on both sides of Planet Avenue?
Actually, sidewalk on the west side only.
West side only, and the one on Key Avenue, it says future 5-foot sidewalk. You're not going to have that? That won't be in place at this time?
At this time, we've not indicated that sidewalk. As the outlot develops and the use there becomes more, when we know what it is, we will revisit that.
Well, I guess I'm thinking of these people that live here to the east of 9th Street. I see them with two-wheel shopping carts going to Walmart and places like that, and they could certainly use this sidewalk on Key Avenue.
And that is provided for in the development agreement.
But I think it should be now rather than later.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Yeah, would you
Mike may be able to address
Gas
that.
going up.
show on the diagram the sidewalk area, would you, please?
You want this?
I believe. Dean, what do you do to make this work?
You gotta hit it hard. Maybe it could be dead.
High-tech fix there. Okay.
There we go.
This is the sidewalk on the west side,
Yeah.
and then this is the sidewalk proposed along Key on the south side. So sidewalk extend here, and then you'd have a sidewalk on the west side.
Not extending then up into Mid-States area.
There are really no internal sidewalks
Yeah,
in Mid-State.
I know. It's just crossing over there would be, there's a street, but you'd have to, I mean, there's paved area, but you'd have to, if you had a stroller or a bike or a,
Is there a pedestrian crosswalk at Key Street on 9th Street?
No, sir. And that's really what we've wrestled with in terms of that sidewalk along Key. As of right now, I'm not aware of any pedestrian provision out there along 9th.
If it remains an unsignalized intersection, then it's probably not going to be an attractive place for pedestrians to come across.
Very unattractive.
Jason referred to me as possibly addressing the sidewalk, and I guess our approach is consistent with any other development. We expect the sidewalk installed at the time that it develops, but the outlots that he was referring to are a future phase. So our expectation as we negotiated the development agreement was it would be required, and we wanted to get that acknowledged, but it would actually get laid out as part of the site plan and site plan review once the outlots developed.
so there's no question there will be a sidewalk there when those side lots develop.
Correct.
Okay.
You have any potential for those outlot to be developed? You got Starbucks on the line, or?
Because that could make a difference in the traffic study.
Yeah.
Make a difference in your approval.
Yes, it would.
The
Traffic study considers those out parcel to be fully
I'm
developed.
not convinced of that.
Boy, we would like to know as much as you would
Yeah, I
what those
bet.
out parcels are going to be, and I don't have an answer for you tonight.
Are there any other questions of the applicant? Thank you. Are there comments by interested citizens? Okay, there being none, we'll bring it back to the commission for action. Dean, I just wanted to clarify that the conditions for approval are actually 1 through 13, with number
10 missing.
3
Number 3 has been modified,
to 520.
several ways, and I can read that if you want to jot down for your own notes how that had been modified. But it's signage on Lot 1, Block 1 shall be limited to 2 freestanding multi-tenant pylon signs, 1 on Interstate 35, 1 on South 9th Street. Pylon sign shall have a maximum permitted sign area of 520 square feet and a maximum of sign height of 50 feet on Interstate 135 and 30 feet on 9th Street. And then the sentence following, signage on the outlot shall be limited to 1 monument ground sign per business with a maximum permitted sign area of 48 square feet.
When we make our motion, need we go through all that again, or
If you wanted to refer to section 3 or paragraph 3 as amended,
as amended?
you could do that, and I think we would accurately reflect that.
Right.
And what's going to occur is that your recommendation will be converted into an ordinance that will be considered by the city commission. So we will. The only other thing I could think, if we want to just be more specific or clarify, there is on condition number 9, says public sidewalks shall be required on Planet Avenue and Key Avenue. We would want to, we had that worded, I think, kind of the way that Mr. Funk was speaking to it, and we may want to clarify that to say that sidewalks should be required on the west side of Planet Avenue and the south side of Key Avenue. And then I think if we want to break that out, then we'd say the construction of, although I think I got that from the development agreement. So, but the way that is worded today, they would have to construct the Key Avenue section before a certificate of occupancy was issued for the first development in there. And so if we want to clarify that, then we would break out those 2 sections of sidewalk.
Is Mr. Mueller, I mean, how do you feel about leaving it the way that it was apparently in the initial agreement?
In reviewing the agreement, it doesn't specify that timing.
I see.
So the reason in like a residential or even some commercial settings where we don't build sidewalks ahead of time is they can tend to get busted up by construction equipment or things related to construction on that site. I think the way that could be clarified would be to is to add the word abutting, and if we said complete prior to issuance of a certificate of occupancy for any abutting lot within the planned development district, which means that the section on Key wouldn't be built until the abutting lot was developed.
So there are 4 lots, is that correct?
There are 2 lots.
2 lots, but it could be, they can be divided.
But that, we could anticipate, I believe, as many as 4 individual businesses or tenants on the outlot, depending on how it
That
developed.
means if we start from the south building up, then a sidewalk doesn't get put in until
That abutting lot is developed. But again, that would be consistent with the way we do sidewalks throughout the city, that if you live in a residential subdivision and there's 3 vacant lots there, you're going to have a gap in the sidewalk system till those 3 lots get built on, because we build sidewalks at the time lots are developed, because they tend to not stand up or tend to have to be rebuilt if you have construction occurring.
So we could use that as, say, condition 9 is amended also?
Yes,
To save us
and
from
to make
reiterating
clarify that the Key Avenue sidewalk doesn't have to be built until the abutting lot is developed.
Okay. All right. Any further questions of staff or of the applicant? I would entertain a motion.
I'd go ahead and make a motion that we approve application PDD 08-2 with the 13 supplemental staff recommendations with the amended stipulations on number 3 and number 9.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve application PDD 08-2 with the 13 conditions and the 2 amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is application P08-3/3A, filed by Land Corps Development, LLC, requesting approval of a final plat of Stone Creek Addition, a proposed replat of a 4.72-acre tract of land located in the Country Oak Estates Addition on south side of Schilling Road, west of Dry Creek. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Our last item, we had a property platted and zoned in 1984 that had not been yet developed, and this is a property that was platted and zoned in 1989 and has not yet been developed. And the request is to take a small area west of Dry Creek that's originally part of the Country Oak Estate subdivision and to replat that. And the primary reason for that is that the original design and layout was based on the assumption that the sites would be developed for manufactured home sites, particularly single wides, and so the layout is not conducive to construction of site-built homes. But the original Country Oak Estate subdivision was approved in 1989. It was a total of 99 lots on 37 acres. This excerpt here just shows you block 6 of that, which is west of Dry Creek. At the time we were first reviewing the Country Oak Estates plat, KDOT announced that they had approved funding for the Schilling Road I-135 interchange, and so the plat was modified to accommodate right-of-way for the interchange. And if you go back to the very original concept in 1989, the idea was, rather than having a manufactured home park where people lease spaces from a park operator, they wanted to create a subdivision where people would own the lots that they placed their manufactured home on. They ended up putting in a grand total of 1 single-wide manufactured home, which is on Marcella Drive yet today, and then they changed their concept, and so what you have in there today is a mix of some site-built homes, some manufactured or modular homes, and some duplexes and multi-family apartments, but the 4.7 acres west of Dry Creek has always remained vacant. And the plan here is to take that 4.72 acres, rearrange the lots and the layout to accommodate site-built single-family homes. The original approval action on what was known as Weston Drive, which is still just a paper street today, the Planning Commission approved a variance to allow that to exceed 600 feet in length. There are 2 conditions that make this unique. You've got Dry Creek dividing the property, and we have school and parkland to the west, so there were very limited choices as to where you could lay out lots and get street access. The other factor is the abutments and the slopes for the Schilling Road Bridge caused the need for the entrance to be located farther west, which just made the street longer. The primary change that's being proposed is the original configuration had a 60-foot right-of-way and 33-foot paving width. They're proposing to reduce that down to 50 feet and 29 foot of paving width. That option is available for short segment and dead-end public streets. They are proposing to change the street name to Stone Creek Court. They've really maintained the same number of lots, 14 single-family lots, but with just a different configuration that accommodates the different shape of a site-built home. We do have 9 lots. This line here represents the floodplain boundary, and so it does impinge upon 9 of the lots that are on that east side. And it's my understanding that the applicants are not proposing to build homes with basements, but I'll let them elaborate on that. The property is still zoned manufactured home subdivision, which does have some provisions what are different than the single family zone, and one of those is the fact that it does allow a 20-foot instead of a minimum 25-foot front yard setback. And the rear yard setback is less as well. There actually was a water line that was extended across Dry Creek when the subdivision was first developed, and that allowed for a looped system. I think we identified, if you can see that in blue here, that this is an existing line that comes across. I think we found that where a hydrant was placed here was maybe a little short of where pavement would be extended, and that hydrant may need to be relocated as part of that project. For sanitary sewer, they would bring a sewer down the street, run it through here, and then they would have about 450 feet plus or minus of off-site improvements that they would need to reach a pump station that exists at the south end of Country Oak Estates. So water exists, so that the 2 major improvements would be street paving and sanitary sewer. Natural gas would have to be extended in down the right-of-way. In visiting with Westar, they have indicated that they don't want to be back here in the trees or along this wooded area here. They are proposing to bring electricity down the front side of the lots. That they've gone to a system where they're minimizing their green boxes that they place, but what this is going to mean is that the transformer boxes will be out in front and not at the rear, because they want to use the street corridor as the way to extend electricity. We have a typo on page 5 there. The base flood elevation here is 1244, not 1249. But what that means is our homes that are placed there would have to have their lowest floor or lowest opening to the basement above that elevation. As I said, they've indicated they don't plan to have basements, but for their purposes it would be easier to have basements on the west side lots than it would be the east side lots. We did have a question, I think, for the applicant's design engineer. If you could go back to one of the plat layouts, John. In our review of the plat, we did not identify any locations here or along where we saw a drainage easement, but it would appear that you would need some corridor, whether it's a pipe or a concrete flume or something, located at some location along that cul-de-sac to carry stormwater from the Stone Creek over to Dry Creek. And so that could have been an oversight on the plat drawing, or there was one there and we missed it, but we would like their engineer to address how they plan to convey street runoff collected in the street over to Dry Creek. This is in the Schilling Elementary, South Middle, South High school district areas. There's no developed neighborhood park in the area. The area behind Schilling School is an undeveloped kind of natural park land, and there is a playground on the school grounds that has playground equipment that's furnished by the city, but there is no fully developed neighborhood park in the area. We do have a situation here where the intersection to the west at Royal and to the east at Marcella is signalized, so that should provide sufficient gaps to get traffic out onto Schilling. Dry Creek was already dedicated as a public drainage right-of-way, and there is the other feature that goes through here that is a consistent feature south of Schilling Road is a 66-foot easement for a high-pressure gas line. And so you would not be able to place any buildings or portions of buildings within that easement. So that does require some adjustments to the lots that abut that gas line easement to make sure there's enough buildable area. I think we're looking at the installation of about 700 feet of asphalt or concrete paving for the street. Because the cul-de-sac exceeds 600 feet, you've got the discretion of requiring sidewalks on one or both sides of the street, and the drainage, we would ask if there was any inlets or flumes planned to drain the street, and then we would need to construct both the internal and off-site sewer to get it to the pump station. We don't see if a benefit district's created that would impact anybody outside the boundaries of this area. Their densities are less than 3 units an acre, which would still be considered low density. So we have identified some recommended conditions of approval. I think item 2 there, we would want to ensure that we had sidewalks on at least one side of Stone Creek to get it out to the Schilling Road area to safely get children out to where they could get up to the crossing and the school site. This will require that underground electric be used. And then we did have a supplemental handout. We wanted to point out an issue which I think from a monetary and feasibility standpoint is a major issue in the total scheme of their particular replat or development is not major as it relates to the plat. But John, I need you to go back to the preliminary plat drawing. This line right here represents a fiber optic line that was put in by Southwestern Bell, now AT&T. And when that bridge was reconstructed, the KDOT required that the fiber optic line be relocated out of the project limits or outside the right-of-way for the bridge construction. And what occurred, I believe, is that they relocated it, but they relocated it farther south than anybody anticipated. And there are easements that run right through here that if they had placed the fiber optic line within that easement area, they would be fine. But what they have done is basically encroached that line across lots 1 and 2 and a portion of 3, and given the location here and here, more so on 2, it would be a challenge to construct on there if there were easements dedicated from Land Corps to AT&T to allow the line to remain there. We have twice sent this. What we normally do with plats is that we send them to Westar, to Kansas Gas Service, to AT&T to get comments from them. Do we have easements where you need them for your plan to extend lines. In this case, we got comments from Kansas Gas and Westar, but no comments from AT&T. So they have not communicated to us about what their plans are related to that. Their options would be to acquire an easement from the developer that reflects the current location. That probably wouldn't be desirable for the developers. They could buy the lots from the developer. That might be desirable monetarily, but it doesn't help the developability of those lots, or they could relocate the fiber optic line to the north. So I think what we certainly don't want to be doing is creating a benefit district and levying assessments for lots 1 and 2 if they're not going to be buildable, or if there's questions about that. So we would request that the applicants update staff and the commission on the status of their discussions with AT&T about what is the likely scenario with that line. It's pretty unusual to get a line like that so far out of any existing easement, but it does impact lots 1 and 2, and to a lesser degree lot 3. So I think our two main items that we'd like to see addressed is how is the, I guess 3 items. I've seen Stone Creek Lane and Stone Creek Court on different drawings, so I think we'd want to clarify whether the proposed change in street name is Stone Creek Lane or Stone Creek Court, then how that street is going to drain and a runoff get over to Dry Creek, and then an update on the AT&T fiber optic line. And then we would want some feedback from the commission on whether sidewalks should be required on one or both sides of the cul-de-sac street. And with that, I think I'd address any questions that you have.
So the fiber optic line is on private property?
Yes.
Outside of the
outside
easement?
of any easement.
Is there any, when you showed the aerial view, there's, at the very southern end of the lots, there are some large trees that run, alongside Dry Creek. And many of the lots. So at which point I guess I see the yellow line, so that means that's the end of the private property line.
Yes. Everything inside this is owned by the city of Salina.
Yeah.
It's public land.
I'm just thinking about the trees, so they can remove any or all of those trees that are on the other side of the yellow line.
If they impinge into the building site. If they don't plan to do basements and are not planning to do any substantial filling or grading, they should be able to do building without that coming into play. Obviously, if you're planning to do filling or grading, then we've seen those cases where trees get removed to accommodate that. But I would defer that to the applicants.
I know we just had a situation where we required the sidewalks on only one side.
That was in the Red Fox addition. There are a number of communities in Kansas that throughout the city only require sidewalks on one side. On our through streets and our main residential streets, we require sidewalks on both sides. We've had the discussion before on a cul-de-sac dead-end street. We don't require sidewalks at all, but in the case of a cul-de-sac that exceeds the 600-foot limit, it does provide for giving the Planning Commission discretion to require it on one or both sides. In the case of River Run, that's off of Marymount Road, we required sidewalks on one side of their long cul-de-sac streets. But it's discretionary on your part. There's only 14 home sites here. There's not going to be a lot of traffic, but we think some sort of sidewalks needed to get children safely out to the edge of the subdivision.
The white line on the west edge of the property is a kind of a trail type
It's a
thing.
little gravel road that the city uses to do maintenance for a pump station.
Is that a city road? Is that on school property?
That is on city property. This line right here, that is the boundary of the Schilling Elementary School site. This property here, including where this road extension would be, is city property, and then this down back here is also city parkland property.
How did the city acquire that?
It was dedicated to the city as a park when the Fox Run Edition was platted. It's pretty much an undeveloped park that has some trails in it that kids walk and ride bikes on and things like that, but it's mostly a wooded area.
And part of this street, Stone Creek Court, goes onto city property. Does there have to be some kind of agreement with the city to...
Yes, we kind of discussed that in the supplemental part. That will ultimately, since it's city property, be decided by the city commission. But there's two places where that exists, including up in your area where actually Red Top Ridge that comes out of Valley View Estates goes across city parkland to get to Markley Road, and Florida Soul, which is the townhome area, their road comes out and crosses city parkland in order to get to Markley Road. So this concept was approved in 1989, but there would need to be, I think, a designation or approval by the city commission to say that's city public street right-of-way and not just parkland anymore to allow that to get built. But it would be done at the developer's expense as far as building it.
Is there a park fee levied on these lots then?
There would be, because there's no developed park.
Right. Now say that again?
There's no developed park. This is all park land.
Yes.
But it doesn't have any features.
So
part of where the park fee goes is if you're going to add a shelter house or other amenities or features to a park. If you have the land and you have the fund, then you use the fund to fund fixtures or features in a park.
So that could
That
be
could be
developed
used,
even further.
yes.
Yeah, okay.
So the onus is on AT&T to resolve this issue with the fiber optic.
That is it's ultimately a legal issue, and that's why we wanted to get an update from the applicants. The city doesn't, other than the city's role involved with KDOT in reconstructing the bridge, which is what necessitated the line being relocated, the city doesn't necessarily have a role here other than to point out that that would not be a good thing to leave that line there because it would impinge on future development of those lots. And from our perspective, basically it's trespassing if a utility builds a line across your property and doesn't obtain some sort of easement. Now they did have an easement there, they just missed.
Any other questions of staff? All right, would the applicant please come forward and address the commission? Give your name and address, please.
I'm Don Dean. I'm with Campbell & Johnson Engineers of Concordia, representing the developers. I can answer part of the questions. You might have to remind me on just what all I was supposed to answer. But
My first one dealt with the drainage on, well, first I've seen on drawings that Stone Court Lane and Stone Creek Lane and Stone Creek Court is.
It's Stone Creek Court is what.
Okay, that's going to be the official name. So we'd have a street name change from Weston Drive to Stone Creek Court.
Okay.
And then second question was, we did not identify any drainage easements leading between Stone Creek Court and Dry Creek as far as where we would see that runoff would be directed from the street over to Dry Creek.
Okay,
And
it may be my false assumption, but I had understood that we could go use the 66-foot easement that the gas line is on, and so right now the design is to carry a storm sewer on the north edge of that 66 feet. And I can't tell you exactly how many feet I was off of it. I tried to be far enough off of the edge of the easement to stay adequately away from the gas line, and also, but so that the city or whomever could get in there and work without encroaching on off of the easement. But
Okay.
that's where we propose it right now. Basically, we would do two inlets, one on either side of the street. We drain the water from either direction to that low point, and then drop it into the storm sewer and take the storm sewer out in an 18-inch pipe out to the Dry Creek. That's what if we cannot use that, then we would probably move it to the next lot line to the north.
Okay.
Between, I don't know what the numbers are, I can't read them from here.
6, 5.
That may be a possible additional condition on there, that they either obtain, our experience has been that they are very protective of the 66 feet and don't want it used by anybody else, but on the other hand, they have approved drainage and other things there by their written approval, meaning Kansas Gas Service. So I think since you are hopefully reviewing this plat for the last time, then what we would do is have maybe a condition that says that they've got to get written approval from Kansas Gas Service to use that gas line easement, or in the alternative, provide a dedicated drainage easement on the plat. Do you have the original plat drawing there, John? The original version? Is that? The original plan had an easement here for a flume that the water would come here and drain there to Dry Creek. So we didn't pick that up on our review to seeing that it was within the 66 feet. The Comfort Suites Motel, they received written approval from Kansas Gas to put a small detention basin in the 66 feet because it was far enough away from the actual gas line. So I think if we had a condition that says if they don't get written approval from Kansas Gas that they'll have to provide a drainage easement on the plat, that would be appropriate.
We can do that.
And then I guess our third question would be an update on discussions with AT&T, or
They're going to have to talk about those.
Todd Welsh, 221 South Morris, partner in Land Corps Development. Before I address that, a couple things I wanted to share about this ground is we identified this as the affordable housing, an area for affordable housing. And when we selected this ground, there were a lot of things going on there with the easement, as well as then we found out later on with the fiber optic cable that's in there and trying to put this in place. But this will be affordable housing subdivision. We are renaming it Stone Creek to make it its own subdivision, and then that's where the name Stone Creek Court was available. And then as Sydney had mentioned, with the trees on the back side, we were asking for a 20-foot setback instead of a 25, so we could push the homes as far front as we could, so we could save as many trees along Dry Creek that we can by putting those in place. We are looking at doing just slab-on grades on the lots on the east that would be up against Dry Creek, but we would like the availability for the 5 lots on the west side to be able to put basements in. If the client chose to put basements in there, we would be out of the base flood elevation on those particular ones. Sidewalk situation, as developers, we would prefer to do 0 sidewalks in this particular location for 2 reasons. One, by moving the homes up 20 feet and then also giving the easement, the 10 feet in the front for the easement so we don't have to run them through Dry Creek. We just didn't want to make the front yards, we want to make it look as pleasant as we can, but we didn't wind up with a sidewalk and just a little bit of front yard and then the house right there. And then the second concern that we have is there are no sidewalks along Schilling, and so we feel like if we just do 1 or 2 and we are required to run the sidewalk all the way up to Schilling, we feel like we're dumping kids out on their bicycles right out on the Schilling with no sidewalks. So I don't know that that's really a good plan to do. So for those 2 reasons, we'd be open for discussion from the commission on what they feel, whether 1 or 2, but I would like to take into consideration of where would we stop that sidewalk if there's no sidewalks on Schilling, of dumping them right out on there.
What about sidewalks on the west side
side.
where you don't have the easement issue?
Where would I stop? And I agree with that. Where would we, so you're talking about the west side, how far would you take the sidewalk up to Schilling, or where would you stop it that's there? That would be my biggest
I
concern.
assume it goes to Schilling.
It's also our understanding that Westar asked for an easement on both sides of the Stone Creek Court. They asked for 10 feet on both sides. That's what I was advised.
And what it means is you would have a 50-foot right-of-way with 29 foot of street in there. So you're going to have about 10.5 feet behind the curb to where you get to people's property line. That 10.5 feet that'll be available for sidewalks in that area. Where Westar wants to be is outside the right-of-way, which means that you'll have the transformer boxes in that 20-foot area between the property line and the front of homes. So the green transformer boxes will actually be inside the sidewalk area. So you'll have this within this 50-foot strip. You'll have a 29-foot street. You'll have 10 foot either side of that, and then Westar is requesting to be able to put their boxes right here, which would be actually behind any sidewalk if you should have one.
You can put a sidewalk on their easement. Is that what you're saying?
And the sidewalk will be in the right-of-way. So it's...
So within that 10 feet before the property line, you can put the sidewalk there.
The main impact I see from Westar's decision is that people will have their transformer boxes not only in front of their house, but actually in their yard portion, not out in the right-of-way. So you'll have the curb, you'll have a 10-foot strip, and then you'll have the boxes.
Can you explain again why, and this is for anyone, why they can't bring them in at the back of the property?
My understanding, and Dean has talked to them, is because they don't want to go down into Dry Creek into that easement.
They don't want to put their lines down in the floodplain, nor do they want to fight around all the trees that are, there's a pretty heavy line of trees both down that Sydney identified, but also going down the property line to the west is a pretty heavy row of trees. They would either have to remove those or somebody remove those in order to go down the rear.
So you'd have if you do it on the sidewalks on the west side, the street, the curb, the sidewalks immediately abutting the curb.
I would think we'd do a property line sidewalk here. I mean, you would have to specially approve a curbside sidewalk because those aren't ordinarily permitted. If you do a curbside sidewalk, then nobody has any place to put their mailbox, or if they put their poly card out, it'll be on the sidewalk. So,
Okay.
That's what normally, 3 feet between the curb and the sidewalk? How far is that usually?
If you had a 4-foot sidewalk in there, which would be the standard, you'd have about 6 feet between the curb and where the sidewalk started.
That would take care of the 10-foot real quick, wouldn't it?
Yes, but the comparison here is River Run, where they did the same thing. The only difference is there they were putting houses at 15-foot setback. But if you drive up in River Run, you will see the street, then you will see the sidewalk, and then behind the sidewalk is the green boxes there for Westar, because that was another place where Westar said, we're not going in back in the trees in the ravine, we want to be in front.
Where I live on Foxtail, that's the same thing, except the sidewalk is adjacent to the curb. And I think it's only 3 feet wide with.
But you have the boxes in front, don't you?
In front, but beyond the sidewalk.
So does
Sidewalk is at the curb.
Westar say that to every community, or just the communities they can get away with saying that?
You mean in terms of putting the stuff in front? I mean, some of it relates to the for developers to go underground with power as opposed to overhead. Westar charges a differential rate, but if they were forced to go in the rear here, I would imagine there would be a very serious cost implication to the developers to get the power in the rear. It is not the norm for Westar to say that. They only do it in cases where there's ravines or trees or things where they just want to avoid.
So it's not just if we can do it as easy as we can, then that's the way we want to go.
No, their norm is still to go in the back, but occasionally we will run into this. River Run was the other example.
My street too.
Well, I feel strongly about sidewalks, so.
Throw a few plants around it.
I'll agree with that. Every one of the focus group meetings that we went to, especially the early ones, the people talk about connectivity and
Did you go to the aerial, John?
Yeah.
sidewalk paths, very important.
And I agree with the sidewalk. I just want to make sure that we walk away here, if we put a sidewalk in it, that it makes sense on what side and where's it going and where are we leading people to.
Well, would you be who would be responsible for the sidewalk on the city's property?
That would be a good thing. Normally, we expect that to be built as part of development of lots. I guess you could say that their obligation ends right here. That doesn't do much good for anyone, but I think Todd's point is that if you stop a sidewalk right here, you're sending them to no man's land, and then that becomes the city has worked to get sidewalks on this side, and actually there's a bridge here and a sidewalk, and it goes down. You might have to scroll over, John, to the crossing. But this is a signalized crossing for pedestrians to get to Schilling School. So the gap is from here over to here. And that would probably be a city responsibility if that were ever to get built. I guess the gray area would be here. I think normally, since the developer's responsible for building the street, the sidewalk would be part of it. That could even be built as part of the street. But the question is, if you get children out to here, then there's a responsibility then to do this. That should be the city of Salina's responsibility. That's our arterial street. But the focus has been on getting to this side. The other thing, you may have to scroll way down, John. It's one of the main issues with Country Oak Estates when it was first developed is the fact that there wasn't a way to get across Dry Creek and get kids over to school, so there's a pedestrian bridge down here, and that takes people from this across the creek and over to the school. And so that's how that's addressed for the people that live on Marcella and south and to the east, is that they get to this point, they can cross the creek and get to the school without having to go out to Schilling.
So that's a cement sidewalk there.
That's correct.
Well, on the original Weston Drive plan, it showed a pedestrian easement. Could something like that not be built, or a way to get over to that other existing one to take care of kids getting over to school?
I guess you'll have to scroll back down again, John. Are you talking about instead of bringing them out to Schilling Road that you somehow get them to the school grounds?
Yeah,
Correct.
right.
Between those lots,
Like a blacktop walkway or something.
between lots 10 and 11.
Where you're talking about something here?
Yeah,
Oh, to there, oh, okay.
I'll get them to school.
You're talking about that in lieu of...
You're talking about that in lieu of a sidewalks?
I don't know. Again, every one of these meetings, if you just listened, that was a very important topic to people, was sidewalks and bicycle paths. I kept hearing that over and over and over again, and I got to believe that that's going to be a responsible thing to do in our, and I bet you $50 that shows up in our comprehensive plan that they submit to us.
I just think we need to be a little creative here and figure out. This is, as you keep saying, affordable housing. I'm thinking that it'll be families with young children. There are going to be lots of bikes and trikes and kids going over to the school using the playground.
See, and I like the thought process where we're going is, again, I don't think that Land Corps has a problem with putting sidewalks in. I agree with you. We want to make it a community. That's why we're renaming the whole thing, or we would just have left it the way it was and gone from there. But I want to make sure that if we spend the money, that it makes sense to get that done. And I just don't see, I mean, the short way for us to say is great, let's put them on the west side as a cost. But again, it doesn't, we're serving 3 lots there. Who wants to get on a sidewalk to walk 3? It just doesn't make any sense to get that done. But I do see, I'd really like that. I don't know whether we could fit it in there. I mean, with that 60-foot or 66-foot gas easement in there, we've been working to get these lots to fit them on there. I mean, these are 1,080 square foot homes, brand new, going to sell for 120 to 140. And we've got them so tight in there to get 14 lots to be able to spread out the benefit district to make these affordable. And if we throw in an easement through there, I don't know what that would do, but I like the idea to bring a sidewalk through there to connect them, because that's really what they're going to do, is they're going to go back to that bike path and then on over to Schilling School. But it's where could we connect the sidewalk in on one side or the other, and then bring a path in there along that side of that long lot to connect in with that bike path. And then even if we can, do we have to get permission from city staff or the city in general to connect into that bike path, or how does that work?
Well, this line right here, it's not, this is the old layout, but you're going to use this path here to put your sewer down to there, so there's already going to be an easement there. You're going to have a buried sewer there. Theoretically, there's a corridor for the sewer. You're going to have a place that you could build a path or sidewalk there. Once you get to this point, this is city property right here, so the city can certainly grant you the right to build a connection there. But I guess I would see that this, if you lived in here and your kids were going to school, I would think they'd be more likely to use this than to come out here and do that. Most of them are going to shortcut, and so
You can't cut across the land. Is that fenced, or is that wide open, or?
Yeah, it's wide open.
Okay.
There is an easement through a gas, that road that you see there, moving down the kind of the gray road. It goes to is that a gas? There's an easement that they have there.
Regulator station there.
So that road will continue to stay there, so that Kansas Gas can come down through there.
Also services the city for their sewer on south.
Okay, services their city sewer on south is where that road continues to go.
What about, there are sidewalks then in the development to the east there, correct?
On Marcella?
Yeah.
Sidewalks on Marcella, but we don't encourage people to use them because when they get to Marcella and Schilling, there's no place to go.
And see, that's what his concern was.
Yes, it's the same thing, that's why we did this crossing farther to the south, is because there is no physical way to build a sidewalk from Marcella across the bridge and over to here. And that's why all the sidewalks are on the north side. And so
Because of the elevation of the
because of the
land.
slopes and the bridge, the way it's done there. And so, to me, getting the ability to get pedestrians from here to here would probably be better effort than bringing a sidewalk. I think what Todd's referring to is they build a sidewalk across 3 lots here, and then perhaps it gets extended to here, and then there's no place to go from there. And knowing human nature, I'd probably see more cutting like that, and it's not fair to expect the school district to build something up like that when they've already helped with that. So this is going to be a sewer line. It's going to be an easement there, which means it can't be built over. There will be a corridor there anyway because of the sewer line. You could conceivably make that a pedestrian easement in addition to a sewer easement and build a path or sidewalk or something over the top of it.
Yeah, it sounds like a good
Done.
compromise.
Developer consider something like that?
Which option, I'm sorry?
Well,
Just from the,
that pedestrian path
Rather than building a sidewalk
between
here.
lots 10 and 11.
I think it makes perfect sense. Again, I think that's this,
Makes more sense than dead ending him on Shell.
I would agree. And again, I can go back to my childhood and say that if you didn't, I mean, it may all look pretty, but if it's not functional and the kids don't use it, going over to that school, it's like we defeated the purpose of us all being in here. So I'm in agreeance with that. Craig, are you okay? Coming down over the top of that easement with a sidewalk connecting with that bike path with city approval. And I think it makes perfect sense.
So it would be built to sidewalk specs as they are. Okay.
Correct. And then my last comment would be on AT&T. It's amazing what has happened. We have been in contact with AT&T, and we gave them a couple options. One is to relocate their lines. 2 is to buy the lots from us, and we could make AT&T Park or something, I guess, out of that. But they chose to relocate the lines verbally to us. We've dealt with local people here from AT&T, and they're moving forward with relocating those lines. We also have hired legal counsel and sent letters to corporate offices just to make sure that we have something in writing in the meantime. They're saying that this is a major line, and we've heard figures from $300,000 to $500,000 to move this line back into the easement where it originally should have been. So we're not talking about just moving up one line. These are major fiber optic lines that service Alltel, Tony's Pizza, the airport authority. They're going to have to shut all those places down given turn at nighttime to move this line. And so it's a pretty major deal. But it does make sense. I mean, if they were, like Dean said, we looked at buying an easement, well, by the time we get the houses put back 20 feet, that lot 2, somebody could walk out and do a post hole digger, and they're only buried 3 feet down, and then now they've snapped the line. They didn't choose to want to purchase the lots from us because they didn't want to maintain them for life as far as mowing and doing things like that. So they've chosen verbally to relocate them at their cost and put them in the correct easement where they're at, and we're okay with that. That puts us back to ground zero where we thought we were at in the first place. And that way we can finish out the subdivision all the way from lots 1, 2, and 3. So that's where we're at. I just spoke to attorneys today, and we still have like Dean, we've had no feedback from them other than we'll let you know what our plans are to do, but we want to get something in writing from them. But we are on top of it, and it's in our best interest to get it taken care of.
So on that diagram there, if moved back into the easement, what does that look like, Dean?
This is where it comes across.
Uh-huh.
And if they
Oh, yeah.
start here go here
Okay.
and up across, they would
Okay.
be within their legal rights to be inside a platted utility easement. And that would be good because it would get out of the usable area of people's yards, so you'll have less conflict and more usable lot for development. But that's our understanding as well. This is not a phone line. This is a major 3-strand fiber optic line, and there's a switching station next to the Baymont Hotel there. That's a major fiber optic switching station for South Salina, and so it's not a phone line. It's a major fiber optic line.
It's an expensive miss.
So they can do this they can do all the prep work and then relay it in one night?
No. That's you have several nights of pairing stuff together, I guess, is what they're going to do. I mean, so it may be relocating one. They're just going to abandon that line, run a whole fresh line. It may be one 900 pair line at one night, and then another 900 pair, and then another one. So they'll do it in phases.
The splicing of lines is pretty complicated operation.
Wow.
Any other questions from me?
Any other questions? No, thank you.
Well, getting back to the sidewalk issue, have we completely resolved that? We would have
Yeah, I think
sidewalks,
Between 9 and 10.
well, between 10 and 11 for access
9
to
and 10.
the, well, I have a lot, but we'd also have sidewalks at least on one side of Stone Creek Court.
I thought we were going
I
to
thought it was a
abandon those.
replacement, yeah.
I thought this was in lieu of that.
Yeah, I think that's what the
Well, that's what I
discussion-
want to clarify.
Yeah, yeah, I think.
As the
I'd have
developers, we would
sidewalks the whole way.
As the developers, we would like to see between 9 and 10 on the sewer easement to allow the children to access that directly to Schilling School, which is what we feel most of them will be using it for.
Then,
Got to make sure you're looking at the right picture.
Yeah.
Because we have the old layout that has the old lot numbering system and then the new layout, so.
Oh, 10 and 11
who's
now.
So which is the new one?
10 and 11 now, I
You
guess.
even said 9 and 10.
It should be between lots 10 and 11 on the new layout.
And 11.
Yeah.
so who's responsible for shoveling those sidewalks?
Oh, I thought you meant for paying for them, we would be, but
I mean, just generally,
In
what
the
would you
case
say?
it's not a common area, it'd be part of people's lots, it would be those
Ooh,
owners. But it wouldn't be any unusual than the sidewalk in front of your house.
yeah, how
Yeah, but
long
it's
is
long.
that sidewalk?
It is long.
Okay. Well, if we're using it, I mean,
Yes.
that's exactly the time when kids are going to use it instead of cutting across those fields. And so I think people need to understand that that's,
Or is there going to be a homeowners association here?
no, we are working on covenants and restrictions, but there is no reason that we felt, I mean, other than until that, I would hate to put a homeowners association together for shoveling of that particular sidewalk. We would just make it as per that lot 10 and 11, that they would maintain that sidewalk, and we could actually put that, I'm assuming, on the deed or the title, or again, it's adjacent to their, like I say, you don't see that on the front lots of regular homes either. I mean, I think it's just standard, you have to shovel the snow.
So it's a city ordinance that the
Right.
abutting owner has to take care of it.
right, yeah. Just so that people understand when a city person comes out and reminds them that that's their responsibility.
Thank you.
Well, and also I think it makes a lot of sense to give them a connection to their friends that are on the other side there. They're going to use that
Yeah, they
walk.
can get down to that bridge.
Right. Yeah.
So I guess we'd be looking at modifying condition number 2 there, that would be modified to say that a public sidewalk would be required between lots 10 and 11 to connect to the existing sidewalk network.
I think we just have to be prepared for when the next developer comes in and says, yes, but you didn't put a sidewalk there. I mean, we just have to understand that what our
Well,
laws
I think each of
justified
these properties are different, and the surroundings are different, and you have to look at them on
Right.
a case-by-case basis, do what's best.
That's what we're
think it's
doing.
quite good solution.
Dude.
Okay. Are there any comments by interested citizens regarding this? Okay, I'll bring it back to the commission then for action. We have one additional condition.
Talked about adding one that says that they need to obtain written approval from Kansas Gas
Right.
Service for draining in the gas line easement, or in the alternative, provide a drainage easement.
Okay.
I will make a motion to approve application P08-3/3A, adding the staff recommendations, amending recommendation number 2 to include a public sidewalk between lots 10 and 11, and adding recommendation number 5 to obtain written approval from Kansas Gas Service, and whatever was the rest of that.
Or if they don't, they'll have to provide a drainage easement on the plat.
When you say include, that would indicate that they might need to have a sidewalk on Stone Creek when you use the
No.
word include?
No, as we amended that
Okay.
to
So a
sidewalks, a public sidewalk shall be required between lots 10 and 11.
Great. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion is carried, and application P08-3/3A. Okay, next item on the agenda is renewal of a conditional use permit approved for St. John's Military School to allow development of recreation fields on the north side of Euclid Avenue in an R, single-family residential zoning district. Permit approved for a period of 2 years in May of 2006 and subject to Planning Commission review and renewal at that time.
If you recall, back 2 years ago in 2006, in May, the St. John's Military School had a plan to construct a new on-campus dormitory facility, and the proposed location for that was where they were presently, or at that time, had their football field and bleachers, which was on the south side of Euclid. And I think John's showing you there the location where that was. That is now occupied by a new dormitory facility. When we discussed it with them, it was outside the boundaries of their original campus on residential zone property, so they applied for a conditional use permit to construct athletic fields in a residential district, which would be similar to schools and YMCA-type facilities, which are also conditional uses in a residential district. At the time, their plans weren't very well developed. They just knew they had to get it out of the way of the dormitory. And so what the Planning Commission did was said, since your plans for how you're going to develop that are not well developed, we'll allow it on an interim basis for 2 years, and then we'd like to look at it again to see if there's any kind of permanent physical improvements or other things that might be needed there to support athletic fields or operations, and some of those might be any comments from neighbors about lighting or spill control, or about parking or driveway access, or needs for fencing or screening. We did send letters out to the property owners either side of this, advertising this as a public hearing. We have not gotten any feedback as a result of those letters. We encouraged each of the members to drive by and see what had been developed there. John has provided some photographs. The actual football field is oriented north to south. They do have a scoreboard and some small semi-permanent bleachers, which are movable. Had some discussions at the time, and not anything in great detail, but the one thing that planning staff noted, and we don't have anything written back from the fire department, was along Euclid Avenue you've got driveway curb cuts that pre-exist from when there were homes there, but there's really there's no path or roadway or anything to get from Euclid up into that area with football events, soccer contests, things like that. The only item that we noted from planning staff perspective is the possible need for some sort of all-weather roadway or drive that could get you from Euclid up to more the northern reaches of this property, whether that was in an ambulance or some other emergency vehicle or just items that might need to be delivered up to that area. It seemed like all-weather access for vehicles was lacking in that area. And from a public or permanent improvement side of things, we have not heard anything about lighting. We've not heard anything about a request for fencing or other improvements. But the one that we identified was perhaps the need for an all-weather roadway extending north from Euclid that could be utilized by emergency service vehicles and others, because it's a pretty long distance there. This site goes all the way up to the levee to the north, and so getting vehicle access there, most time I think maybe the grassy area would suffice, but the only thing we saw that was perhaps missing in the way of improvements would be a all-weather roadway. We do have a representative here from St. John's Military School, and they might be able to answer questions about frequency of use or events there. But I think that would be the only comment that we would have.
Any questions of staff? Okay, I'd ask the applicant to come forward, please. State your name and address.
My name is Lance Werber, and I reside at 1402 North 5th Street, and I work at St. John's Military School.
How often is it used?
Well, sometimes 6 times a year, sometimes a year for the games. Actually, they do exercise, PT, and stuff like that out the field on a daily basis. But mostly for public, usually probably about 4 to 5 times a year.
How big a crowd do you get for those events?
Probably the most I've seen is 200 at the most during homecoming, something like that.
And where's the parking?
Yeah, where do they park?
Park on
How
the
do they
street,
get there?
and they also park in the gym parking lot on the south side of the gym.
And do you have plans for making these permanent structures?
No, not as of yet. No.
Did they use the gym for restrooms and things like that then?
We have a facility across the street, Stevens Center, that they have for restrooms and stuff.
Are we approving this permanently in this? The request is that we approve this permanently in this configuration?
Right. Your options would be you could renew it again for a fixed period of time to review it again, or you could renew it unconditionally, essentially making the change in use permanent, or you could renew it on a permanent basis, but subject to them making certain physical improvements, or you could decline to renew the permit. But those would really be your choices if you're inclined to basically make permanent the approved change in use. Then you decide whether that should be conditioned on something or whether it would be unconditional use.
How do you envision the road? Where do you envision that going, Dean?
There's 2 places. You could actually put it on the west side of behind the bleachers there. There's a curb that comes, driveway that goes in from the older houses in that way. And then also on the east side, right on the house that corners our property on the east side, there's another. You saw it here on the map. It's got the 2 telephone. They had to do some telephone repair, line repair. That's a driveway access too, and we should be able to have that access back as soon as the phone company fixes the lines. And you could put a cement or a gravel or whatever, an all-weather road there too.
And if you did that, you'd have to have a turnaround at the other end?
Most
I mean,
likely.
you couldn't just have
Most
a straight
likely,
line,
yeah.
right? You'd have
If
to
they
have a turnaround?
didn't, they probably wouldn't want to encourage that as a parking area, but I mean, it'd be a place where if you had an ambulance or something or delivery that you could turn around and get back out. It
Where
wouldn't
would
have to be a
Where
full.
would it be on this diagram here?
Well, this field is facing the wrong direction.
Right,
Yeah,
It's run north
this
and
was
south.
conceptual, but
It would be-
it faces north-south.
Is there an aerial view of the property?
You don't intend to change it to east-west?
No, it's
Oh, okay.
permanent the way
It's
it
going to
is.
stay north-south,
Okay.
all right.
The house that's on the right there, there's a fence line, and you could run a road there in that area there. There already is kind of a road there already because of the trucks going in, hauling dirt and stuff, and doing the grading for the field.
And it
It's
wouldn't,
just not all weather.
yeah, it wouldn't need to be a hard surface, though. It could be a gravel surface, is
No,
that what you're
for
saying?
fire department purposes, it could be gravel enough to support a fire apparatus or an ambulance without worrying about it getting stuck.
And we've never had a problem with them. They can they can drive in the grass anywhere they want to. I don't care. I can fix anything. It's not a big deal. I know if it's raining or something like that, they would have a problem, but we've never really had a problem before.
So the question is, for 6 public events a year, do we consider that enough of a concern, enough of a health and safety concern to require construction
Well,
of a
it could
road?
go up from 6, because if they develop a soccer team, then you could have 12 or 15 soccer games there also a year to add it on to the 6. And that's down the road as the enrollment increases, but it's not at this point. It's not a consideration.
But if you're practicing every day, you still need access to
true. That's true.
potentially.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of military activities that go out there too. There's a lot of that.
And the football team practices in that area?
Yes, yes they do.
Possibly you could need an ambulance during a practice.
Hopefully not, but
Right,
they possibly
that's
could.
possible.
Yes.
Sure.
Have you had any issues with the lighting and the neighbors? Apparently not. There's no.
No, and we've most of our games are rather short, so the lights are not usually left on a lot. So they're usually by 8:30 everybody's gone. So the lights I've turned them on at night, and they are fairly bright, but they're pretty directional, and they don't bother the people on the east side. It's a little bright for them, but the west side is not too bad at all.
Did we have a case before us a year or so ago about a paintball court or something?
Yes, that's going on the north side of the dike. That's where if they
North of the dike.
on the north side of the dike. There's a dry creek area.
How far is the end of your football field
Field
from
is-
the dike?
Well, I think it's about 20 yards from the end of the goal line to the dike itself.
20 yards?
Yeah, and then you go over the dike, and we own that property on the other side of that too.
Okay.
And that's been constructed?
No, not yet.
Oh,
No,
okay.
no, not yet.
Field sits more in
Okay.
here because it's in a north-south configuration.
See, we purchased a property that
This is owned by,
we
St.
bought. We
John's
purchased
also.
that.
Okay.
We purchased that property, and then on the other side of the dike, we purchased that also.
Okay. All right. Any further questions of the applicant? Okay, thank you.
I just have a question. Dean, do you have any problems with doing this for an extended amount of time?
it's just a monitoring thing, and it's also, just for St. John's to remember and feel confident about, their use of it. It's, there are certain types of conditional uses that we have approved for fixed periods, like sand pits and things like that, are for fixed periods of time. I don't have a problem with that if the concern is that, there may some modifications or changes here that you want to look at again. That's why it was done for 2 years, because it wasn't clear how the area was going to be used and what the needs were.
But if the use changes, though, would that not facilitate coming back before the commission for another approval?
Well, I guess the only thing I see here is maybe intensification. I mean, it's approved for athletic fields, it's used for soccer, parade grounds, football, all those things. I guess if they went in there and tripled the amount of bleachers and things like that, that would be something that might concern us.
Sky boxes, Starbucks.
Yeah, luxury suites.
The only thing that they may do is build a track. They want to do that, but that's not going to, they're not going to have track meets. They just want to practice, build a track.
Still athletic in nature.
$289,000 is probably not going to happen for a while.
It's still athletic in nature.
That's right. That's the only thing.
Okay. Are there any comments from interested citizens? Okay. There being none, we'll bring it back to the commission. Are there further comments, questions of staff?
I mean, things like accessibility, I mean, you know,
Yeah,
it appears to problems. I mean, I'm okay, but I think it ought to come back here in a couple of years and see what's up. I mean, there are some
kind of a hybrid
shortcomings
between
here.
fields and being a stadium. I mean,
Yes.
it does not have the things that you would normally expect of an athletic stadium, so it is kind of a hybrid.
So how many years would you be comfortable with?
Oh, a couple. I'll be gone by then. Yeah.
With the road
Well,
stipulation?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, if they have public events, there are no restrooms. It's not handicap accessibility. There's no road for emergency vehicles. There's obvious to me some deficiencies if it's used very often for those kind of things. Now, very few events like that in small crowds. It's okay with me currently, but you know, I don't know what the future brings with them and with events, and someone else uses the field and have more people there. You know, I don't know.
We do take and get portable restrooms out there during special events for purposes, you know, for the people and stuff, and anything. And also, we have a parking lot. We have an area that's just to the east of that we can park cars into, also to help keep cars off the road. We own the corner lot on 5th and Euclid.
I guess one observation I had when I was out there for a tour was that they were hosting I think the West team for the East-West Shrine football game, and they were in the dormitories and using their facilities for practice. So, I mean, there is a possibility of those types of activities occurring.
So if somebody would donate $3 million and say, I want this money to go to building a sports complex here, and this isn't a conditional, we don't go back in with some kind of a conditional obligation here, that could be built there without any other action by...
Yeah, I think it's that fine line. We're treating this, we're classifying it as school athletic fields. I don't think we're approving an athletic stadium here. So that would be the fine line. I think if you got to those kind of permanent improvements, that would probably be outside the scope of what this is more for, I guess we'll call it recreational fields. And, you know, it was part of the uncertainty about what kind of physical improvements were intended that made this a interim use subject to later review.
Well, maybe not a stadium, but a refreshment stand together with decent restrooms. You know, that'd require a building permit. But that's now beyond, I think, what we're envisioning at this point.
Yeah, I am, yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind it at current usage level.
Yeah.
I just don't want to open the door for a lot of other stuff without back for some kind of review. That's why I think some kind of timeline might be relevant here. But
the one option would be to have the time period. The other option would be to just have a condition that said if the nature or character of the use changes, that they would have to amend their conditional use permit.
Yeah,
I like that.
That'd be fine, too.
That sounds good.
except that we won't really know as that's changing when they necessarily when they keep adding soccer and they add something else and they add something else.
But if it involved a concession building
Yes.
or things like that, we would know, and then we would probably bring that back.
I do think an all-weather roadway at this point even makes sense.
So did you want to, are you in favor of renewing it for a specific number of years, or just as long as this nature or character doesn't change? What's the commission's view on that?
I'm okay with the statement Dean said about if the nature, the character of the activities changes, then it would need to come back to the board for review.
Okay.
Yes.
So there'd be two conditions then that we'd be interested in, the all-weather road for emergency access and the nature and character change. Okay. Any further questions of staff? All right, I'd entertain a motion.
I guess I'd make that motion.
As said.
Okay.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to renew the conditional use permit for St. John's Military School to allow development, or to allow the recreational fields to continue as is, with two conditions, one being a need for an all-weather drive from Euclid north, and the other, if there is a change in nature or characteristic, that you would return to the Planning Commission for approval. Okay.
Correct.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion's carried, and it is approved. Okay, other matters, Dean?
Other matters, we will meet the first week of June. I've been working with the city attorney to try to get appropriate language to put before the city commission on the moratorium question on electronic billboards. We are aiming towards having a study session that first June meeting to talk about wind turbines, just to get an educational update on the changing technology. The county seems to have a 6-month moratorium, I understand. I don't think it'd take us that long to necessarily put something together, but we just want to differentiate between your large production wind turbines and the kind of things that people may want to put on their own home or lot. And it's one of those, similar to the digital signs, it's one of those changing, emerging technology things where you kind of have to get up to speed to understand what the changes. But the main thing I have noted is that it's basically a miniaturization of the technology to get it down to a scale where people may want to try to use it to power their households. And so we need to get up to speed on that.
So to speak.
So
In speed.
Well, what happened to solar, which isn't quite so big?
well, I mean, solar really, I mean, we have some passive solar houses around. I don't think solar can quite generate the output that some of the wind turbines have. And so I think that's part of it is the production aspect of it. But there's a lot of discussions about, you know, how high should you be able to go, you know, because you have to capture wind, and if you put it at 30 feet, you're not going to capture much wind. You usually have to get up higher than that. And so we'll be discussing height and what should be allowed as of right and what might need to be reviewed before it goes up, and land area you need and that type of thing.
So that we don't offend anybody, we need some 20-somethings on this commission.
So keep up with changes. But we have a couple, we're having a run on group daycare and preschool requests, and so we'll have a couple of those upcoming. I think we have 3 filed right now. So,
For the June meeting.
well, for consideration in June, yes. But we will meet that first Tuesday. I think that's probably enough damage for this evening, and
Yes.
I got a baseball practice to get to. So.
The meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
I had to call to